John Kelly challenge. A man arrived in Brisbane in 1865 with his young family. Surely that can't be enough to begin a family history research project. Well, let's find out. In fact, that simple challenge was the entirety of the question posed by Queensland Family History Society to its members a few weeks ago. A young man named John Kelly arrived in Brisbane with his young family by ship in 1865. Can you find his age and his occupation? It wasn't a terribly difficult challenge. Once you got into the shipping lists, you could find that the family arrived on the ship called the Vialia, and you could then locate a passenger list for the Vialia, and we see an extract of it just here, which shows us that J.N.O. Kelly, Jonathan, that's an old 19th century abbreviation, age 25, was a gardener shepherd when he arrived. He arrived with his wife Susan, also 25, another J&O, presumably John Jr., who is sometimes recorded as being aged 1, but I suspect that's a tally mark indicating that he's a male between the ages of 1 and 12. And under the crease is his infant sister Elizabeth, less than 1. Well, that was such a straightforward task that I decided to make it a little more difficult. And I asked you, what can you find out about the life of John and Susan Kelly in England before they came to Queensland in 1865? And the answer, of course, was not very much. We need some more information. It would be helpful if we had Susan Kelly's maiden name before she married. Well, that formed the second part of our challenge. What was Susan Kelly's maiden name? And by using Queensland birth, marriages and deaths, we came to the conclusion that Susan Kelly was the daughter of James Lansdowne. Now, there's by no means proof, but this was the most obvious candidate. So, let's repose the question, what can you find out about the life of John and Susan Kelly, née Lansdowne, in England before 1865? I intend to use 3 tools to investigate this. The first one is the General Register Office, the UK, part of Her Majesty's Passport Office, the official collector of information on births, marriages and deaths. We also need to use Free BMD, a community group that indexes marriages, because despite the fact that the GRO is the official collector of information on marriages, they won't let you search for marriages on their sites, just births and deaths. So we'll need to use Free BMD. And backing up these two is Family Search, the huge online genealogy repository owned by the Church of the Latter-day Saints, which contains information from all over the world, including some very useful English records. Now, I have all 3 of those open on my computer because both GRO and Family Search require you to have an account into which you have logged in. Free BMD just lets you start searching, but so to simplify the process, I have all 3 ready to go. So let's make a start. We're going to look for a marriage between a man called Kelly and a woman whose maiden name was Lansdowne. We believe that it occurred before the September quarter of 1865 because they were married when they boarded the ship. And they've got a couple of young children, so I'm guessing they haven't been married for very long. So I'll start my search in 1860. We don't know where they were married, so we have to leave all of those as all districts in all counties. So just in case there's a huge number, let's take a count. How many people meet our criteria? Well, sadly, the answer is no records match your query. So we'll need to go back and revise our query. Now, I guess there are 3 possibilities. One is that Susan and John were fibbers and they weren't married at all. 2 is that they'd been married for much longer than I thought they had, and I should search earlier than 1865. But the third possibility, and I think it's probably the most likely, is that they spelled the name Kelly or Lansdowne differently to the way I have. Now, there are all sorts of possibilities, and we could play with wildcards, but I quite like this option down here, phonetic search surnames. I'm going to run exactly the same search and ask FreeBMD to look for any marriages that sound like the names Kelly and Lansdowne. So let's take our count again. This time, 5 records match your query. Much more promising. Let's click Find to display them. And there's the 5. Catherine, Mary, John, Louisa and William. We can immediately rule out Catherine, Mary and Louisa. We may have to come back and have a look at William Kelly, but at the moment I'm pinning our hopes on John Kelly, married in the September quarter of 1862 in the district of Reading, and the details are recorded in volume 2C, page 565 of the General Register. So let's have a look and see what shows on page 565, which tells us certainly that John Kelly got married, but also a woman called Susan Lansdowne. I think we found them. And we can see here straight away why I needed to do that phonetic search. Not only did I have an E on Lansdowne that wasn't necessary, I was short an E on the way John spells Kelly. But it looks like we've now found them. Now that's the only information that we can get from FreeBMD. But with this data, we may be able to find something more in family search. So let's jump across there, remembering Reading, September 1862. So I'm going to search for a man named John Kelly with an extra E, who got married in a place called Reading in 1862, and we'll set that as the 2 as well. So we want it in that year. His spouse was a lady called Susan Lansdowne. And just in case there's a lot of Readings in the world, Family Search is a worldwide organisation, we'll specify that all this took place in the country England. Run our search. And here we see John Kelly, marriage, 1862, Reading, Berkshire. Let's have a look. Is this some more information? No, it's not. It's exactly the same information as we got from FreeBMD, because FreeBMD and Family Search both have access to the same register records. So this does confirm what we got from FreeBMD, but it's not an additional source of information. So let's close this record and have a look at this top one. Not only does it tell us the spouse, Susan Lansdowne, it claims to know the date of the marriage, 29th of September 1862. Who could possibly know that if it isn't on the official register? Let's have a look. Family Search just calls this England Marriages, 1538 to 1973. Not the most descriptive of titles, but if you look through the list, you notice that in addition to the event place being in Reading, where we know the marriage was registered, this second one, event place original, St Mary Reading. This is the church record of their marriage, not the official register. So the vicar of St Mary's Reading married John Kelly and Susan Lansdowne and filled out 2 forms on that day. He entered it in his parish register, noting that the service took place on the 29th of September 1862, and then he transcribed the information onto the official record, sent it off to the register office. So the register office certainly has the date, it just won't show it to you unless you pay some money. But it looks like this parish registration, which is a second record, gives us this information. Let's go back and see if there's anything else in that list of results. The first two were good. The second one tells us John Kelly died in 1864. Well, we know that can't be the same John Kelly because he was alive in 1865 when he came to Australia. John Kelly was living in Berkshire in 1891. No, he wasn't. He was living in Brisbane, so that's not him. John Kelly was born in 1863. Now, that's an interesting possibility. If John and Susan got married in September of 1862, it is very possible they had their first child in 1863. Let's have a look for some more details. As you see, this is from the official England and Wales Birth Registration Index, same format, place, volume number, page number, John Kelly. Once again, the registration office has details of the parents, but chooses not to make it available on this site to encourage you, no doubt, to pay for the certificate. But let's just make a note of that. Volume 2C, 338, April, May, June, 1863. Because let's now go to the registration office and say we want to look for a birth. We want it to be in 1863. The person's name is Kelly with an E. He is a boy. The birth was registered in the district of Reading in the April, May, June quarter of 1863. The volume was 2C. The page number was 338. Do you have any further information you can give us? We do indeed. The mother's maiden surname was Lansdowne. So this is information which is in the GRO collection, but is not available to you through Family Search or indeed through FreeBMD, which is why we need to keep all these tools open and step backwards and forwards between them. So now we know that this is Jonathan Jr. We know that he wasn't 1 year old when he sailed. He was a little older than that. That is indeed a tally mark. Children's ages weren't generally recorded on shipping lists. But let's see, if we know that he was born in the June quarter of 1863, what else might Family Search be able to tell us? Let's go back. Now, you recall we found him in a search which was actually directed at his father. But we can modify this a little bit. John Kelly stays the same. We're not interested in marriages now, so we want to put in the birth, which occurred in Reading in 1863. And he's not married to Susan. We might be tempted to put in that Susan was his mother, but let's see what happens if we just leave it as that, John Kelly. And here it is. John Kelly was born in 1863. A quick check. Yes, exactly the same information as we already saw on GRO UK, because they are referencing the same information. But look at this second entry. John Kelly, Father John, Mother Susan, christening date. It looks like we've got another church record. St Mary's, Reading, same church where his parents were married. Young John was christened on the 5th of July, 1863. We're doing so well with this strategy, I think I might jump back to GRO, because you recall I needed to specify that I was searching for a male What if we looked for a female? She won't be born in the same year, obviously. Perhaps the year after. Probably in Reading. We don't know the quarter, the volume, or the page. Let's see. Girls born in Reading, named Kelly, 1864. Search. Oh, look at that. In the December quarter of 1864, Elizabeth Kelly was born to Susan Lansdowne. Once again, all we know about the date here is that she was born in either October, November, or December. I wonder if we can get a christening date from Family Search. Let's go back and have a look. Back to our search. Modify the results. We're no longer looking for John, we're looking for Elizabeth. Born in 1864. Update the results. There is Elizabeth, 1864. Confirms the GRO, but no new information. We have that already. Where is the church record of her christening? Was she not christened? Was she christened somewhere other than Reading? I was worried by that. Then I thought, well, John was born in one quarter and was actually the June quarter, but was actually christened in July, in the next quarter. What if the same was true of Elizabeth? She was born in the December quarter. If she wasn't christened until January, that would be in the next year. So let's extend our period here to 1865 and update the results. And there is our christening, April 1865. Let's look at it in a fuller format. Yep, same church, St Mary's, Reading, 2nd of April 1865. I wonder what happened. Was it a terrible winter and they didn't want to take her out to church? Did they wait until it was warm for the baptism? Or was it in fact that by now they realised they were planning to go to Australia and they said, well, we can't head off without baptising little Elizabeth in the family parish church before we go? We can't be certain, but we do know that we have now our two entries, the official civil registration of the birth and the church record of the christening. And the church record of the christening usually gives us a particular date. Now, I don't think there's anything terribly useful there. So instead of proceeding, let's jump back into free BMD. You recall we had to use it for our marriages, but we can use it for births and deaths. So if we say we're looking for a birth, Kelly with an extra E, we're looking between June of 1863 and December of 1864. Now the temptation here is to put in Lansdowne. Unfortunately, it won't work because the GRO doesn't let free BMD have access to that line, which tells us their mother's maiden name. So we could do a count, but it would be a huge count of Kellys, but we can, in fact, look at the district of registration because we know the family was living in Reading. So we can just select Reading here and do a count. Only 2. Well, that's good, because that was exactly what we were expecting. Let's find them. John, born in June quarter of 1863, and Elizabeth in 1864. Now, I stress this isn't any additional evidence that we had. We're just looking at the same birth records through a different source. But back to here, what have we found out about the life of John and Susan Kelly? Well, we now know that John Kelly married Susan Lansdowne in the September quarter of 1862. John Kelly was born in the June quarter of 1863, that's John Jr., and baptised on the 13th of July 1863. Elizabeth, his sister, was born in the December quarter of 1864 and baptised 2nd of April 1865. The family boarded the Vialia at Plymouth 17th of June 1865 and disembarked in Brisbane on the 19th of October 1865. And the piece of information that we started this phase with, Susan Kelly nee Lansdowne, died on the 28th of May 1894, which is a wonderful achievement to have resolved all of that, but really it just leaves us with more questions. What can we find out about John and Susan's parents? Where was John and Susan living before they sailed? 1894 seems very early for Susan to have died. What happened there? They came to Queensland with 2 children. Did they have more? What happened in Queensland? We've barely scratched the surface of this challenge.